an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Vor Saga, the Vor Game, chapters 10, 11, and 12. In these chapters, Miles and Gregor just keep getting handed from one group of bad guys to another, it feels like. It's like really good luck or really bad luck. I can't decide. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Let's see, who is responsible for today's episode? Sofia. Thank you, Sofia, for commissioning this episode. I just wanted to let folks know that immediately the folks who have been commissioning these episodes after my previous one, which went an hour and 20 minutes, they got together and they're reorganizing the chapter breakdown so that the episodes don't run quite as long as they have been. And I appreciate that so much, although I won't appreciate it when I have to stop reading earlier than I would have had to if I had just kept my mouth shut. But it just truly was not sustainable for me to be doing episodes that long every time. So it's all for the best. Chapter 10, Miles is realizing after the way that they ducked out of there and he gave somebody else his identity, that he is going to have to hide. And I'll be honest, you guys, I wasn't entirely sure what the plan was here. Because, like I said, there was a dude previous who Miles gave his own identity. Then Miles, I guess, takes his, but not really. Like, he doesn't... he is essentially making it seem like he is still in play, but he hasn't fully replaced the dude that he knocked out. So I'm not sure how this all works. And eventually they come in looking for him specifically. So evidently giving that dude his name, it didn't really work. I'm a little bit foggy, you guys, and I listened to this part twice and I still don't feel like I really get what it was he was trying to accomplish. So let's see. Miles began by examining the bunk cubicle. And he hears people in the hallway. He realizes, I am going to need to get the fuck out of here. And there's a bunch of cabinets and stuff, and he decides that's just way too obvious. They'll search those right away. But there is this floor panel that is really small, and he is just about able to get in there if he exhales the air out of his body, which, that is so tight, and it was very evocative to me. Okay, Jeff says, I also am foggy, and I've read it thrice. That makes me feel better. It doesn't bother me, not like in terms of the plot that I don't get it. I don't find it to be important, but it is the sort of thing that the fact that I haven't gotten it this many times makes me feel like, am I missing something really obvious? And, it's possible that we both are, but it just makes me feel better to know that if I am missing something obvious, I'm not the only one. So these dudes come in, a guard, and they begin to hassle Gregor about where Miles is. And they're assaulting him to get him to talk. But Gregor just tells them that he left. He took off a few minutes after we undocked. He must have doubled back onto the consortium before we cast off. Their problem. Good. But we better search the whole ship to be sure. Detention sounded ready to chew ass on this one. So they head out, and he comes out of his little hiding place. And he's thinking that he has to free Gregor because what he's into is a slave labor contract. And, you know, this dude's the fucking emperor, and he is going to be quite at risk in the jobs that they have him do, according to Miles' assumption about what Gregor would be made to do. It doesn't seem he was entirely on point with this. So let's see. Gregor had one hand pressed to a red mark on his cheek. Self-consciously, he lowered his hand to his side. They tapped me with a shock stick. It wasn't as bad as I imagined. If anything, he looked faintly proud of himself. And Miles just says they were using low power. And I couldn't help but laugh. I sort of wondered if there was like going to be a moment where he stops and is saying to himself, why am I trying to sort of beat this guy down? And because, you know, he's done that before when he has put someone in their place a little bit and like regrets it an instant later as being kind of snotty. But he does not have that moment here. So this scene is odd to me. I'm going to try and go back and read this. Let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where Gregor describes. Here it is. Way back when he's talking to Miles about how he got out by himself. I didn't know why there'd been a man there earlier. They thought I was asleep, I guess. It was after midnight. I couldn't sleep. I was leaning over the balcony and thinking if I toppled off, it would be quick, Miles supplied dryly. Yes, I was a little drunk. It would hurt a lot, but not for long. Maybe even not a lot. Maybe just a flash of heat. I went over. I caught these plants. Then I realized I could climb down as easily as up. More easily. I felt free as if I had died. And you guys, I feel like the first time around, I did not give this moment the weight that I should have when I was reading it. Because in this scene, when he and Gregor are talking, there is a point where he wonders to himself just how unintentional had that topple off the balcony been. And there was, like, to me when I read it, it didn't actually feel like it was unintentional the way that Gregor described it, actually. It felt very much to me like Gregor was saying that, like, I toppled off because I was sort of testing my luck. And it wound up being easier to do than I thought, so I just followed through the rest of the way on this plan. But the way that Miles is reacting to it here felt very much like what he was saying was, you were really trying to kill yourself, and you second-guessed and caught these vines on the way down because in the midst of it, you felt like you had made a mistake. Which I feel very naive, I guess, for that never having occurred to me. That maybe he was actually trying to commit suicide and had second thoughts all of a sudden. It truly never entered my mind. And it's not until this section where, because like Gregor is described as always having been a somber kid, even when young. And we saw the things that he had to go through, like some of them, and it was pretty grim. So to a degree that makes sense with his experiences. Everybody handles things differently, but it follows. However, the way that I can't tell exactly if the sense that he has had of Gregor is more depressed than usual. if Gregor has always been kind of this depressed and it's just been seen as like a symptom of his circumstances and not an issue with his mental health specifically, because there are different kinds of depression, and there is the constant low level depression that you can have when you're just like suffering from a lack of serotonin and dopamine. There can be a constant, more deep, profound depression. And then there can be depression that's brought on by circumstance. And with time, it begins to dissipate. And so I think that I had been imagining him as going through like a spate of it here. But thinking back on how he was described, it made me wonder if maybe it hasn't been more of an ongoing battle for him. And considering everything, being a fucking emperor. And not only that, but an emperor in a place like Barrayar where there are such strict guidelines for how to be. And also the fact that, we find out that I say we find out, we don't really, but there's the theory that perhaps he doesn't know what his father was really like. Miles isn't positive, but what if he does know? What if somehow that information got to him? There's a mention, I feel like, in the Discord, a couple people said, because I was wondering where Miles found out, and you guys reminded me that it was talking to Elena Bothari's mother, Elena, about him. So it's certainly possible that he doesn't know, but I just, with the tragedy that has been visited upon him with being ripped out of his mother's arms, basically, and then her dying, I want to say on his behalf, but it didn't really do any good. So part of me is like, is that accurate? But yeah, this whole history of his has rendered him from a young age being really, really alone. And I just can't imagine being that kind of alone and being always surrounded by people who are, on the surface, attempting to obey orders, but that within that, everybody has their own agenda, and it's just impossible to quite know what it is, who to trust, how much to believe anything you hear. And that comes up here with him, like, really feeling a chagrin about how he almost got played regarding what was going on with the Dendari mercenaries, and how Miles was basically being framed up to look like he was committing treason. He clearly has this sense of like, I'm not even doing a good job. All I have done is what I have been told my duty is to do. And yet, if I'm this bad at it, I could be a liability to my people that I'm claiming to try and serve. And yeah, I really, that broke my heart, because it's the sort of thing that I could really understand. I feel like I could see myself falling into that line of thinking myself. When you really take your job seriously and you, like, at least partially grasp the gravity of the kind of power that you hold, realizing how easy it was for somebody to fill you with lies and you bought it. Embarrassing doesn't even begin to cover it. Like, that would also be so terrifying. It's awful enough to find out as a regular ass person that you have been betrayed by somebody and led astray. It can be affecting nobody but you yourself. And it's still kind of an earth-shattering thing to realize how wrong you were about a person. I can't even imagine when it's at the levels that he is dealing with the number of people that he serves. It just seems overwhelming, and I just really feel for this kid. I want Miles to be like his right-hand guy in a way that I know is the opposite of what Miles really wants. Miles reminds me of his father, and both of them are in this peculiar position where they're very, very competent, and in part due to that competence are intelligent enough to be like, well, that job sucks. I don't want that. I don't want to do it. No. But they can't, it's like being a regular job, and you wind up doing too well, so you get given more responsibility, and it isn't until it's like too late that you realize, I shouldn't have been this good at the job. But you can't help yourself, you know? So anyway, this whole thing, I just really was sort of surprised at when Miles wonders that to himself. I was like, God, that never even occurred to me. So I'm trying to find the spot here. So Gregor says that I was going to contact the Baryaran consul on Asland. I could have made it on my own, but then there was my other plan, not to contact the Baryaran council. Maybe just as well you came along when you did. One thing is certain, an opportunity like this will never come again. To escape? And just how many would die back home to buy your freedom? Gregor pursed his lips. Taking Vordarian's pretendership as a benchmark for palace coup, say 7,000 or 8,000? You're not counting in Komar. Ah, yes. Adding in Komar would inflate the figure. Don't worry, I'm not serious. I just wanted to know. I could have made it on my own, don't you think? Of course. That's not the question. It was for me. Gregor, you're doing this to yourself. You have real power. Da fought through the whole Regency to preserve it. Just be more assertive. And, Ensign, if I, your supreme commander, ordered you to leave this ship at Aslan Station and forget you ever saw me, would you? Miles swallowed. Major Cecil said I have a problem with subordination. I loved this moment because it's such a great illustration of the weirdness of how power works and how you can allegedly possess the ultimate in it and yet be kind of hamstrung by the circumstances and expectations and, you know, the loyalties. In this case, it's much more, I feel, even a personal loyalty. It's just fascinating to me how well illustrated the point is with this little example. So, let's see. I didn't answer your question about orders as an ensign. I answered it as Lord Verkosigan and as a friend. You don't need my rescue, but it makes me feel better. It's always nice to feel useful, and it's nice to have company. Miles nodded. That, truly. So, Miles is having to just hide all over the place, ducking into little, compartments and shit to dodge these guards that are still looking for him. Gregor was herded out with the rest of the labor crew soon after the ship docked at Aslan Station. Miles waited nervously, trying to give as long as possible for the ship to quiet down, for the crew to go off guard, yet not so long as to risk the ship undocking and thrusting off with him still aboard. The corridor, when Miles cautiously poked his head out, was dark and deserted. So he finally steps out, and there is there are a few people that he runs into that basically leave him entirely alone until finally some dude hails him and is like, hey, you there, I'm gonna need your help. And Miles is like, oh, well, I do drains. and clearly is hoping that this is going to put the man off because that's such a specific thing, you know, and to be like, yeah, I'm sure I'm not of any use to you, because he calls him a techie. And so I don't know if the word, you know, when you call somebody a techie in our present universe, it usually has to do with the idea of like computers and programming, or like engineering in terms of building electronics in this sort of setting, I would think. And I don't know that that's true, but I kind of, I assume that's how Miles heard it. So when it turns out that they can use him, even though he is only familiar with drains, according to his own assertion, he's just like, God damn it. So Miles does have enough knowledge to handle this situation. This is so funny. This dude is like, our tunnel here, it's like a pipe, but there's a leak in the wall. Crawl in and find it. So we don't have to tear out all the paneling we just put up. And he slides in and he finds the like draft coming through, and he turns to tell the guy. And as soon as he turns, his foot goes right through it. So one of the dudes who's like in the hallway outside of where his head is coming through was like, the fuck are you doing? And Miles says, quality control inspection, and boy, do you have a problem. So he comes out and he's like, are those panels supposed to be made of like some flammable, very porous shit? Because somebody has fucked with you guys real bad. I suggest you take a couple of those big goons with shock sticks and go pay a visit to your supplier. I am so curious whether or not this has to do with a larger problem. And what I mean by that is the subpar quality of the supplies they're getting here due to the actions of another character that we know or have met, or another conspiracy or something like that. This just is such a major moment that it feels like it has to mean something. And I can't help but laugh at the fact that maybe they were supposed to not find this out, and Miles has stepped in and been actually decent at the job, and somebody who had a bigger plan in place got screwed, potentially. So I learned a new word today, you guys. It's not even a new word. It's a sort of meme phrase called corn plating. And I'll just give a very brief explanation. But the movie Encanto came out. There are a lot of layers to the movie, and so it was big in the discourse for a while. And you know how online discourse goes, where eventually you've chewed over every single thing you can, and then people start to just observe silly, stupid shit that doesn't matter. And somebody posted a tweet about how I didn't know this girl was even carrying corn in this scene. And it's a screenshot of a character who's holding a plate full of corn. And there are two reactions to this. One is somebody going, oh my God, y'all have really run out of shit to talk about with this movie. I am crying. Like, just being like, oh, look, she's holding corn in this scene. And then there are other people who are like, yeah, well, her superpower is hearing, and she's holding a plate full of ears of corn. It's a joke. And, you know, the other people are just like, it's not a joke. You put that together and that's fun. I don't think that's what they meant. So now corn plating has come to mean reading into something more than the author actually intended. And I love this new phrasing because it's such a concise, memey way to put it. And so I am going to just occasionally reference this. And with the corn plating on this pipe thing, I don't think it has to be something. It has to be. right? So anyway, I just had to mention this. So he passed a pair of armed men in gray and white uniforms. One turned to stare. Dendari, or Oserans, aboard the station. How many? He wished he were back in the walls. Miles had left Elena 4 years ago as Baz Jessek's wife, as Tung's military apprentice, as much protection as he could get her at the time. But he hadn't had any messages from Baz since Oser's command coup. Could Oser be intercepting them? Now Baz was demoted, Tung apparently disgraced. What position in the mercenary fleet did Elena hold now? What position in his heart? And I really was surprised at myself that in the midst of all of this, I hadn't considered the time jump and what it meant for Elena, and that I hadn't asked any questions about what she's doing. So, you know, I think that Elena isn't as interesting to me as I kind of thought she was, considering the fact that I never really even wondered. So, and he knows, like, if I run across her, she's definitely going to recognize Gregor. He needed to find a place to watch without being seen. There were all sorts of ways to be invisible while in plain sight, as his blue smock was presently demonstrating. Miles had the case in hand and was around the corner in a blink. A couple of levels away, he found a corridor leading to a cafeteria. He pulled a panel off the wall, donned a pair of protective goggles, climbed into the wall, and began pretending to work on a control box and some pipes. From the wafting odors, he judged they were serving an unusually good grade of vat-grown beef in there. I haven't really addressed the mentions of protein cubes, fresh-grown vat meat. And you guys, I haven't addressed them because I don't like it. However, I will acknowledge plenty of things can be produced in more than one way, and that doesn't change the flavor or texture of them. It's simply a different source, and they have succeeded in making, like, you know, synthetically made meat. Synthetically isn't even the right way to say it, but you know what I'm saying. This is a thing that is in development. I'm sure it's fine. In fact, if you're able to create meat from a vat, from some sort of chemical recipe, why wouldn't you just design all of your meat to taste like the best cuts available naturally? So for all I know, the meat's better than the meat that we normally eat. It's, you know, like it all is a filet mignon sort of texture and flavor. I have no idea, but it just doesn't sound nice. It just doesn't. It's fresh from the vat. Like, I don't know, you know, and you could justly push back on that and be like, does it sound nicer to be like, that leg is freshly off a killed cow? Like, no, fair, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I had to touch on that here. He contemplated his odds. Of all the couple thousand mercenaries now present, he might know a few hundred by sight, fewer by name. But the leather-colored face topping the next set of gray and whites to pass down the corridor made Miles forget his stomach. It was Sergeant Chodak. So he pulls Chodak aside, and it's just like, you need to get Elena Bothari or one of my guys. And he names off a bunch of people. He's like, or Mayhew, or Quinn, or, you know, like, figure it out. And meet me in Greg Bleakman's cubicle. And Chodak runs off. And then he goes back to speak to Gregor, and he tells him, we're going to have a meeting with these guys, and all of a sudden, these soldiers turn up. And soldiers, they're coming in quite aggro. And I'll be honest, y'all, I really never thought that Chodak betrayed Miles. he assumes for himself that he misjudged, that he has flattered himself he can read people so well, and in fact is an asshole and an idiot who screwed up. And I really didn't jump to that conclusion. I was actually going so far as to be like, perhaps this is all these guys are behaving as if they are coming to confiscate them and take them prisoner as part of a little plan that Elena set up when Chodak got in contact with her. I was so unconcerned that I went too far and even thought that these dudes were on his side, really. And no, it's Oser. It's Oser. Oh my God, this fucking guy. We don't actually find out, I don't think, who spotted him, but somebody must have. So what follows is this really fascinating conversation. Still lean and hawk-faced, dark hair maybe a little grayer at the temples. Miles had remembered Oser as taller, but he was actually shorter than Metsov. Oser reminded Miles somehow of the general. And Gregor is looking at the expression on the man's face and is like, what did you do to this guy, Miles? And he's like, nothing on purpose. And Oser, I absolutely love this whole interaction, and I'm going to have to speed through some of this a little bit. But Oser is essentially trying to question Miles, but Miles, who has fallen into his Admiral Naismith role, is pushing back so effectively that he almost trips Oser into giving Miles information. And there finally is a point where Oser is just like, you know what? Throw these guys out the airlock. Throw them out. I can't even let you talk to anybody because you are so convincing. I almost said something to you myself. I can't have this. And I absolutely loved it. And it reminded me of a character in another series that I covered is so similar in the way that he is able to convince people of things that eventually the way somebody deals with him because they can't just kill him is they rip his tongue out. And that's literally the thing that he says is like, if Miles speaks again, just take it out. And as much as Oser is not a guy that I like, I can't help but appreciate his understanding of Miles's abilities. And it's not good for Miles that he understands how capable Miles is. But I appreciate that this is an enemy who hasn't underestimated him at the very least. So yeah, this whole thing is so funny to me. It's fucked up, but it is really funny. So they're getting dragged, and I love that Gregor starts to yell at people, calling them bloody peasants. Then eventually a guy, he's like, y'all are about to throw a fortune at the airlock, and most of the dudes ignore this, but one dude stops and is like, really? How much? And a guy who is not falling for it gets his knife out. And he's just like, well, I guess I'll have to take his tongue. They warned me this would happen. Which I was like, oh, that's exactly what he warned would happen, isn't it? That he would just say something that he did. Oser, you're on the ball. I can't fault you for it, man. So these dudes are also distracted that they don't see what's his face, the guy that he initially, Chodak, that's his name, come out of nowhere and take them down. Damn fine soldiering, Miles panted to Sergeant Chodak in the sudden silence. I don't think they even saw what hit them. You two aren't so bad yourselves for men with both hands tied behind their backs. What a team, said Miles, and then we go into chapter 11. So, he sees Elena, who looks pretty much the same. She's cut her hair, that's the main thing. And it's an interesting energy because she is apparently under the impression that Miles was going to turn around and come back and help them all out at some point. I was startled by this, you guys. I really thought, out of everybody, she would be the one that would understand how impossible that was going to be for him after everything. If he just managed to skirt an accusation of treason, he can't turn around and go back and command these guys again. Like, that doesn't look good. It's not. I was just really surprised at the fact that she is holding it against him as much as anybody. I thought that she'd be sort of defending him or making excuses, and she isn't. So, yeah, this whole thing is so... It's full of surprises. So Miles is like, what are we going to do? The guys, when they don't report back, they're going to know something happened and they're going to start searching for me again. They took a drop tube, emerged several decks down, and found themselves at a large cargo lock engaged to a shuttle. So they get in there and they take off. And Mayhew is in there with Tongue. Delightful. Mayhew salutes. He's sworn to Miles. So that's correct. He should. But Tongue does not. And I am not surprised. So they take off. And Elena says, "This is a routine scheduled run, except for us unlisted passengers. We know you haven't been missed yet, or traffic control would have stopped us. Oser will search the Triumph and the military station for you first. We may even be able to slip you back aboard the Triumph after the search is passed to wider areas." "This is Plan B," Tongue explained. "Or maybe Plan C. Plan A, on the assumption that your rescue was going to be a lot noisier, was to flee at once to the aerial. I'm grateful for the chance to bring things off a little less spontaneously." So then Tongue is like, "All right, so what's your plan?" And Miles is like, "Plan?" And Tongue is like, "Yeah. Why are you fucking here?" And Miles says, "It's an accident, actually." Tongue pursed his lips. "Accident? Your accidents, I once noticed, have ways of entangling your enemies that are the green envy of mature and careful strategists. Far too consistent for chance. I concluded it has to be unconscious will. If only you'd stuck with me, son. Between us, we could have... Or maybe you are simply a supreme opportunist, in which case I direct your attention to the opportunity now before you to retake the Dendari mercenaries." I love this whole interaction. I missed Tongue. I was glad to see him back again. So they describe how things seemed to go well for the first year or so after Miles left. And then we got into trouble. Baz had gotten more and more involved with equipment and maintenance. He's a good engineer. And Oser, I thought by default, but now I think design, took up the administrative slack. And then as time went on and they kind of got fucked up by one of their contracts, and he admits for himself that he dropped his guard a little bit because there was just not much going on, Oser just outflanked him and turned everything over. And Elena is like, "Yeah, I told you 6 months ago not to trust him after he tried to seduce me." You guys, this is so excellent. I love this so much. This is such good commentary of a woman experiencing something shitty at the hands of a shitty man, telling her peers and them shrugging it off like it's no evidence of them being a shitty man, because I can understand how he may have been tempted. I was so disappointed in Tung for his response to this. He did take no for an answer, you said. If he'd kept leaning on you, I'd have been willing to step in. I thought you ought to be flattered, ignore it, and go on. If this isn't, you ought to be flattered like all women, all our lives. That's what we're told about sexual harassment. Overtures of that sort contain a judgment of my character that I find anything but flattering. Thank you, Elena snapped. I really, really appreciated this. If I'm his commander's wife, if my oaths meant nothing to him, how little did his own? Amazing. I love this showing of his cards and the fact that she tried to say something and was ignored by a man because, of course, he just doesn't take it seriously. Dudes don't ever take it as seriously as they should. It never fails. It just never fails. So this was just I just felt so true to life. All he had to do was swing the votes of half the other captain owners. Austin voted with him. I could have strangled the bastard. You lost Austin yourself with your moaning about the triumph, Elena put in. He thought you threatened his captaincy of it. As long as I was chief of staff in charge during actual combat, I didn't think he could really hurt my ship. I was content to let the triumph ride along as if owned by the Fleet Corporation. I could wait till you got back and we found out what was going on. And then you never came back. Let it be a lesson to you, Miles murmured to Gregor through set teeth. This whole thing is so beautifully written, you guys. So, this is when Elena is just like, I really thought that you'd fucking come back. And it's, the subtext is that he would fuck up his time at the academy and have to find something else to do. So I'm trying to jump because, again, you guys, I'm really worried about my time here, and I have a lot more to talk about. Chapter 12 is really long. So let's see. Sorry, I can't talk about that, Miles said. I have to get to Vervain. Get us both to Vervain. You're working for the Vervani? Tung asked. No. Who then? Tung's hands twitched, so tense with his curiosity they seemed to want to squeeze out information by main force. Kai, back off. If Miles wants Vervain, Vervain he shall have. Tung looked at Elena, at Mayhew. Do you back him or me? We're both oath sworn to Miles. Baz, too. And you have to ask why I need you, said Tung in exasperation to Miles. What is this larger game that you all seem to know all about and I nothing? And more of this conversation, I can't get into every, but suffice to say, they have to decide what they're going to do, and if they do Vervain. So, Miles is struggling with whether or not he's still in love with Elena. Miles? I don't care. Let it go. I'm sick of it. Enough already. And when they have a little one-on-one, they talk about how tense things have been. He asks whether Baz is treating her right. And this is when she tells him, like, why the fuck didn't you come back? That was a screwy thing to do. Baz felt he'd failed you, but you failed us first. And I just didn't think that was fair. I understand being resentful, but you have to make things happen yourself after a point. He can't be the only thing holding it all together. And you should have known. I just don't understand how she thought he was going to come back. Like, how he would be given the freedom to do that. So, anyway, then they get talking about Gregor. And Elena is like, I understand why you want to get him back, because it's going to look real bad if something happens to him when he's with you. And Gregor is just sort of like He's very passive in the scene, as he often is forced to be. And then eventually kind of pops up in the midst of the conversation with there's a real sense of him just simmering off to the side. And he's treated like an inanimate object a lot, but he is listening, and he is definitely emotionally reacting to things. A lot of our people are former military folk. Some are even legitimately discharged. If only you were in charge here, eh, Miles? No, Miles said in a choked voice. The light died. It was a joke. Not funny. Miles breathed carefully, praying it would not occur to Gregor to make that an order. Anyway, we're now trying to make it to the Barryaran console on Vervain Station. It's still there, I hope. Let's see. Ilian's plans, what was that where Ungari had gone? Approach with caution, anyway, Miles allowed. And she tells them that there is somebody on the other ship named Cavilo. And that is the person who tried to buy him at the consortium station, which we find out is the hot little blonde who is low-key psychotic. So we have a little talk about how battle and war is really stupid, a waste of energy. If they can go to all the trouble to fight, they should be able to talk. And then, all things considered, Tung said, this is not a lot of danger to us. He'll think he's delivering more mercenary agents for a price and naturally keep his mouth shut. It'll be days before he gets back to even be questioned. If only you'd stayed with us. What a soldier I could have made of you these last 3 years. Miles found himself face to face with Elena. Give my love to your mother, she told Miles. I often think of her. Right, give my best to Baz. Tell him it's all right. Your personal safety comes first. Yours and his. It was a good try. The look she gave him was cool, edged, indecipherable. No, readily decodable, he feared. Idiot, or stronger words to that effect. So, there's the transfer, and they are able to get cleaned up, and he's realizing that, like, when he gets home, he's going to have to write a report on everything that happened here. He's thinking, like, maybe Gregor can give me a pardon on stuff, and I won't have to. Gregor was very quiet. You were weird as Admiral Naismith, you know? Almost like a different person. I guess Naismith is me with no breaks, no constraints. He doesn't have to be a good little Vor, or any kind of a Vor. He doesn't have a problem with subordination. He isn't subordinate to anyone. I noticed. Do you regret having to duck out on the Dendari? Yes. No. I don't know. I trust you don't regret escaping contract slavery. No, it wasn't what I'd pictured. It was peculiar, that fight at the airlock, though. Total strangers wanting to kill me without even knowing who I was. Total strangers trying to kill the Emperor of Barrayar, I can understand. This? I'm going to have to think about this one. Like being loved for yourself, only different. And then he brings up Elena, and Miles just shuts that shit right down. I'm surprised you didn't take up Tung's offer. Instant admiralty? Skip all those tedious Barrayaran intervening steps? Tung's offer? Didn't you hear him? I thought you said Dom made you read all those treaties. Tung didn't offer command. He offered a fight at 5-1 odds against. Oh, Yeah, still I wonder if you'd have chosen something other than this prudent retreat if I hadn't been along. And Miles says, yeah, I think I probably would be heading to Escobar with Overholt. That's what, if I hadn't run into you, that'd be the way it went. And I was like, I don't know if I believe you, sir. I feel like you think that after all of the excitement that you have been into recently. But if things had gone a different way, I don't know, maybe. So they dock and they follow the captain out. And then a bunch of new soldiers appear with stunners out. And Miles is like, what is this? And he's thinking maybe Tongue had set him up. But it's this captain who is being threatened. And it's unclear, but I believe his family is already dead. And he is being fed this line that they are still alive and will be kept alive as long as he continues to work for them. But it is later blown by Miles that it was actually a recording he has been being fed, and they are likely already dead, which seals his fate. So, surprising no one, here is Livia New. But surprising probably a lot of us is General Metsov. Surprise! You guys, this fucking dude. And I was as surprised as Miles that he's working with a woman. Also, he's sleeping with her. And I genuinely wouldn't have expected him. I think that what I thought was that that Metsov would see how this woman used her sexuality for power and would be unwilling to cave because he would see it as some sort of concession to her power over him, and he didn't want her to feel like she had any leverage, so he wouldn't sleep with her. But I underestimated his capacity for thinking he is smarter than anybody else, especially because she is a woman. So he doesn't think this is any power of any kind because he doesn't understand that she is smarter than him, probably. And there comes a point where she says something about how he, during pillow talk, she just sort of let a thing slip. And Miles is like, she didn't let anything slip, dude. She's telling you shit on purpose. Seeing what you do with it, or as a warning. And I was giving him the kind of credit that I would give to somebody like Tongue. And I shouldn't. So, yeah, Metsov at first is absolutely delighted when he sees Miles. But then, when he looks over at Gregor and recognizes him, he goes completely pale and is just like, oh shit. And honestly, Gregor's presence is the only thing keeping Miles alive in this chapter. I don't think there's any way Miles doesn't get broken apart piece by piece if Gregor isn't here. And Gregor tells Metsov a few times that, I'm sure my security is on the way. Really trying to make it seem as if people know I'm here or somebody's coming. How long can they keep that up? Genuinely don't know. And when Miles is like, Metsov, what are you even doing here? He's like, I got discharged and stripped of my pension and all of my life savings. What the fuck was I supposed to do? So I was just, I was expecting, and you guys know that he was involved in some sort of weapon scheme. And based on his involvement with this woman here, I would feel like that was exactly what was going on. But when he talks about just having all of his means of living stripped from him, that felt quite sincere. And so it made me sort of back up and reevaluate, maybe he did just want to save the stuff in that storehouse because of the principle of the thing. It's hard for me to really believe that, but he has a screw loose, clearly. So perhaps, I don't know. So let's see, I'm trying to be really careful about how into the weeds I get on this chapter. Because like I said, this is a really long one. Like in the audiobook, it's a 45-minute long chapter. Let's see. So last I heard he was under arrest by Imperial security, though of course no one believed they were serious about it. And he is the Emperor of Barriar. Are you sure? Even Kavila was taken aback. Really? How interesting. What's he worth to them? Or, for that matter, to the highest bidder? I'm Vor, ma'am. In a sense, the Vor. Risk in service is the Vorish trade. I wouldn't assume my value was infinite, if I were you. Gregor's complaint had some truth to it, Miles thought. When he wasn't being emperor, he seemed hardly anyone at all. But he sure did the role well. If we hold him hostage, we ought to be able to handle them with ease, Cavillo commented. An alternate and more prudent course, Miles interjected, would be to help us swiftly and safely on our way and collect a lucrative and honorable thank you. A win-win strategy. Honorable. Metsov's eyes burned. Then he fell into a brooding silence and muttered, "What are they doing here, and where's the snake Ilian? I want the mutant in any case. Damn, it must be played boldly or not at all." Does he know he's talking out loud? Metsov's not okay, guys. It just really feels like this man is he is like a step away from really spinning wildly off track. It's like he's jumping off the tracks intermittently and managing to fall back onto them by mistake. And if he hits anything further, it's just going to completely send him careening off. So Miles gets sent to the brig, but Cavillo wants Gregor brought to cabin 9. Cut the outgoing comm, lock the door, and post a guard with a stunner, but supply him with any reasonable comfort he may request. So, that whole thing, I really wish we were in the room for, but we shall see. So the freight captain was just leaving the guard station, and this is when Cavillo tells him, "As you see they remain in good health, my half of the bargain. See that you continue to play your own part." And this is when Miles says, "You saw a recording." And she is just like, "Okay, I guess I have to deal with him." The freighter captain turned. Cavillo motioned the guard to open distance. He fell away, and Cavillo glanced at Miles and smiled very sourly, as if to say, "All right, smartass, watch me." In a cold, smooth motion, Cavillo flipped open her left side holster seal, brought up a nerve disruptor, took careful aim, and fried the back of the captain's head. He convulsed once and dropped, dead before he hit the deck. Miles, it's such a grim moment because it's like he really did cause this guy's death, but also this dude's family was already dead, and it's clear his days were numbered anyway. So there's like the possibility of if I were able to make some things work out, perhaps in the end I could have saved him. But as things were currently going, I don't think this man was going to be able to get out of eventually being killed by this woman. So I fully understand the guilt that he is feeling, and I don't think that is unwarranted. But I also want him to sort of keep that in mind. So he gets put into these quarters, and he is being given like basically the equivalent of power bars to eat. And eventually when he brings this up, she's like, "Oh God," and sends him some really excellent cuisine in multiple courses, which y'all know I deeply appreciate. Why not? Sure, go ahead. Metsov comes to talk to him, and what a turn of fate. I thought you'd be dining with the Emperor. Commander Cavilo, being female, can get a little scattered under stress. When she calms down again, she'll see the need for my expertise in Barryaran matters. In other words, you weren't invited. You left the Emperor alone with her? Gregor's no threat. I fear his upbringing has made him altogether weak. Miles choked. This man is so backward. I can't believe how he looks at everything from the wrong direction. It's remarkable. Like, it's almost on purpose. How can you be this bad at evaluating every situation? Oh my God. So, the news of the captain being killed, he shares. Metsov is like, oh, well, he was the only witness to where you came from, so that was clever of her. And Miles is sort of like, I wonder if she thought of that or not. And how do you think that I came to be in the Emperor's company? Some plot. Miles groaned. Oh, of course. And what sane, or insane for that matter, chain of conspiracy do you imagine accounts for our arrival here alone from Asland? I mean, I know what it really was. I lived it. But what does it look like? I just love to hear it. Well, you have somehow separated the Emperor from his security. You must be either setting up an elaborate assassination or planning to implement some form of personality control. That's what just springs to mind, huh? Or perhaps you're on some secret and therefore dishonorable diplomatic mission, some sellout. If so, where's Gregor's security? So my first hypothesis is proved. In that case, where's my security? A Vorkosigan plot? No, perhaps not the Admiral's. He controls Gregor at home. A twisted plot from a twisted mind. Do you dream of making yourself Emperor of Barrayar? The medical staff will squeeze out your secrets as soon as Cavilo gives the go-ahead. In a way, it's a shame Fast Penta was ever invented. I'd enjoy breaking every bone in your body until you talked. Maybe I will anyway. 1 bone a day for as long as they last. Oh, God. And Miles is thinking he's pissed because he's been fucking this chick and she just tossed him to the side as soon as an Emperor turned up. And so he's coming to somebody to chitty chat with because he's feeling a little rejected. And he actually kind of understands that, which I did think was probably exactly correct. And then it all coalesces in the one thought, like, oh, he's homesick. And this dude been homesick is the thing. Even in Barrayar, he was homesick for a Barrayar that doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it ever did. But that seems to be like just longing for things to be a different way is his permanent state of being. And that's so sad, honestly. So their conversation goes on a little bit here, and it doesn't really, it's like a lot of going in circles in some ways. But Metsov in the end admits that he is planning to either kill or plan the death of Cavilo and take this whole operation over, and really seems to have no concerns about this, that he will be able to pull it off eventually, no problem. It's just like an inevitability. And Miles is like, is this place being monitored? Like, does she know? And is wondering, she may know anyway, you know. Perhaps she didn't even need to hear this convo. It may have been very obvious from the way he behaves. So eventually he leaves, and Miles is just like, I don't get it. What the hell is this? Who's the target? This makes no sense. It was almost more disturbing than the thought of Gregor supping unguarded with Cavilo. So I mentioned, you guys, that I was going to try and move things over into the next episode if I didn't have time. And I don't. So next episode, I'm going to talk about the remainder of Chapter 12. I'm going to put a little bookmark on this here so that I can recall exactly where I left off. But this is not the last time slot of the day. So I have to watch my time more than I do in the last slot. Because in the last one, I can just keep going. But in the middle slot, I have another recording that's going to be coming up. So I really do have to end at a reasonable time. So apologies for that, but hopefully if we have reworked the chapters, I'll be able to carry over into the next episode and it won't be too difficult to make time on that. So fingers crossed. All right, guys. Thank you all again so much for listening. Appreciate y'all being here. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.